In 1859, an American named Edwin Drake struck oil near Titusville, Pennsylvania. This was the first oil well ever drilled in human history. It didn't just change how humanity used petroleum. It ushered in a brand new era, the age of oil. Now, let's take a look at the lesser-known rise of John D. Rockefeller. John D. Rockefeller was an American industrialist, a super capitalist, and the founder of the Standard Oil Company. By extending his reach into every corner of the globe, Rockefeller gained control of the U.S. oil industry and became one of the wealthiest individuals in history, the undisputed oil king. Opportunity strikes at the Drake Well on the 27th of August, 1859, in the village of Titusville, Pennsylvania. American engineer Edwin Drake successfully drilled the first modern oil well. This marked the world's first commercial oil venture, and the date is now celebrated as the birth of the modern petroleum industry. News of Drake's folly hitting oil spread like wildfire. Refiners rushed to the area, and oil companies began popping up across the country like mushrooms after rain. Engineers, drillers, and speculators flooded into emerging oil towns, many of them veterans returning from the battlefields of the Civil War. Wherever there is money, crowds follow. Soon, pickpockets, prostitutes, and outlaws arrived, all with their sights set on the oil workers' paychecks. In the autumn of 1860, a year after the first strike, Rockefeller set out from Cleveland by carriage to investigate. Along the way, he saw line after line of wagons hauling barrels of oil. His business instincts kicked in immediately. He started crunching the numbers. If a barrel sold for $3.5, but the wagon transport to the railroad cost 30 cents, the math didn't add up, especially since there was a river nearby. If they used boats, shipping costs would plummet. When Rockefeller arrived in Titusville, he found a village transformed into a bustling, chaotic boomtown. Drilling rigs were everywhere, and workers lived in dilapidated shacks. Returning to Cleveland, Rockefeller met with his produce partner, Maurice Clark. He told Clark that Titusville was a mess and that oil prices were bound to crash. He predicted that old money businessmen would risk investing in such a volatile market, which meant there might be a massive opportunity for them to swoop in. Rockefeller was right. The frenzy of over-drilling led to a massive glut. In just a few months, prices tanked from $20 a barrel to a measly few cents. The industry stopped being profitable. Prospectors abandoned their claims, leaving behind rusting derricks as monuments to a boom that had soured before it even peaked. While others gave up, Rockefeller kept a watchful eye on the industry. He made several more scouting trips, and though the outlook remained bleak, he wasn't discouraged. He watched one company after another go belly up, waiting for his moment. Finally, that moment arrived. In April 1861, the American Civil War broke out, cutting off shipping on the Mississippi River. Meanwhile, the big three railroads, including the New York Central, were racing to lay tracks, turning Rockefeller's home base of Cleveland into a major transportation hub. Around this time, a British engineer named Samuel Andrews entered the picture. Andrews, who had experience in kerosene refining, approached Rockefeller's partner, Clark, to pitch a refining venture. Clark turned him down. By chance, Rockefeller was in Florida on business when a friend asked if he'd be interested in buying a refinery. Not wanting to be rude, Rockefeller agreed to take a look. After touring Andrews' facility, he realized that kerosene had a much brighter future than animal fats or vegetable oils. He saw that oil would eventually become the lifeblood of society. Partnering with the railroads, the rise of an empire. By 1863, Cleveland was home to many small refineries. Seeing this, Rockefeller became more determined than ever to start his own. The Civil War was in its second phase, and the country was still in turmoil. But Rockefeller couldn't wait any longer. He revisited Andrews, listened to his technical analysis, and realized they were on exactly the same page. He eventually convinced a reluctant Clark to invest with them. By 1864, Rockefeller began taking a hands-on approach. dedicating most of his time to the refining side of the business. With a perfect division of labor and impeccable timing, business boomed. However, friction between Rockefeller and Clark grew intense, and the business began to suffer. To seize control, Rockefeller bid on the refinery at an auction in February 1865, winning it for $72,500. At just 26 years old, he became the owner of Cleveland's largest refinery. In one fell swoop, he ruthlessly cut his difficult old partners out of his future. By late 1865, the American public realized that kerosene was the premier fuel for lighting. Life without oil was becoming unimaginable. Now, in total control, Rockefeller went all in. He took out massive loans, bought the best equipment, and expanded his plants. Soon, he was producing 500 barrels a day, with annual sales reaching $1 million. He quickly teamed up with his brother William to start a second refinery in Ohio. William closed his own business to become his brother's right-hand man. Together, the brothers began their march toward an oil empire. By 1869, their daily production had surged from 2,600 barrels to over 7,800. This volume made them the top dog in the American oil industry, with virtually no competitors able to keep pace. However, the railroads began to hinder growth. The three major systems, the Pennsylvania, the New York Central, and the Erie, wanted a piece of the action. They started price wars and offered secret rebates to lure customers, which ironically allowed oil companies to play the railroads against each other. At the time, the railroad kings were Cornelius Vanderbilt and Jay Gould. In Cleveland, the Pennsylvania Railroad held a monopoly because its tracks led to the drilling heartland of Pittsburgh. They used this leverage to charge Cleveland refiners exorbitant rates, hoping to crush them in favor of Pittsburgh. While other owners panicked and prepared to move their factories, Rockefeller saw an opportunity to turn a bad hand into a winning one. He knew that to control the industry, he had to control the logistics. He began leasing every available tank car, oil tanker, and barrel he could find. Before long, his competitors realized there were no cars left to move their oil. Rockefeller had cornered the market on transportation. It was a lethal move. By forcing the railroads to lower their rates, he effectively outmaneuvered Vanderbilt and used the savings to catapult his company to a new level of power. The birth of the Standard Oil Trust and the great merger as profit soared. More people jumped into the oil business, leading to overproduction and another price collapse in 1869. Rockefeller realized that the only way to stabilize the industry was to consolidate. In January 1870, Rockefeller and his partners, Andrews and Flagler, incorporated the Standard Oil Company in Ohio. The name Standard was chosen because Rockefeller wanted to guarantee a standard of quality and uniform barrel sizes in a chaotic market. To fix the industry's instability, Rockefeller began a campaign of aggressive acquisitions. He invited other refiners to join the South Improvement Company, essentially a cartel. Those who refused soon found their railroad shipping costs skyrocketing, while Rockefeller stayed low. Then, Rockefeller would move in and buy them out. This swift, secret campaign-style expansion infuriated independent producers. Ida Tarbell, the daughter of one such producer, later wrote the history of the Standard Oil Company, exposing Rockefeller's tactics. She described the atmosphere as one of conspiracy, where oilmen called Rockefeller's Group a monster or a giant python. Rockefeller was unfazed. In a single 4-month stretch in 1872, Standard Oil swallowed up over 20 Cleveland refiners. This became known as the Cleveland Massacre. Biographer Ron Chernow noted that Rockefeller felt a sense of revenge during this time, finally crushing the senior peers who had looked down on him when he was starting out. When negotiating with Alexander of the Schofield Company, Rockefeller was unyielding. Even when an old boss came to plead for mercy, Rockefeller told him plainly, "Sell to Standard Oil or go bust." He cryptically added, "I have ways of making money that you know nothing about." The old boss buckled and sold the company for a fraction of its value. By the end of this run, Rockefeller controlled 90% of the state's refining, pipelines, and rail cars. Within 8 years, Standard Oil's share of the U.S. market jumped from 4 to 95%. The father of the trust with a near total monopoly, Rockefeller faced a new challenge: how to manage a massive, scattered empire without violating state laws. His legal counsel, Samuel Dodd, suggested creating the world's first trust. Under this structure, different companies across various states would merge into one cohesive entity while technically maintaining separate books and boards. On the 2nd of January, 1882, the Standard Oil Trust was born. Rockefeller moved his headquarters from Cleveland to New York City. He was no longer just a small-town oil merchant. He was a titan of industry with a registered capital of $70 million and over 40 companies under his thumb. John D. Rockefeller had built his kingdom, becoming the true oil king of the world.